Hey, what's going on YouTube? Welcome to another League of Legends video. Today I'll be covering everything you need to know in patch 8.6. I'll be covering everything from all the buffs, nerfs, and adjustments to the new emotes, skins, and even the new rune. Now as for how big this patch is, it's actually pretty damn significant. There is a lot of changes. In fact, there's a ton of changes. Let's start by covering these buffs, nerfs, and adjustments, and then move into the new stuff that was added later on in the video. Now, one of the main reasons for those champion buffs would be the changes to the Dusk Blade. Although on paper some of those champions were buffed, they kinda got nerfed at the same time because the Dusk Blade does a lot less damage. For melee champions, this item used to do between 65 and 320 damage, and now it's only 30 to 200. Of course, this is still the same for ranged champions, but they did lose less of a percentage because before the change they were 45 to 300. It did, however, gain two new passives. The first one is called One, which makes melee attacks, one-shot traps, and wards disabled by Blackout. Then the second one, Redundancy, made it so Blackout won't trigger if the owner is currently using a sweeper. So in short, this has made it so you will get better vision control if you do have a Dusk Blade, but the damage did drop. Another item that received some very significant changes would be the Ginsurage Blade. This item had its cost decreased, attack damage and ability power decreased as well, and the base magic damage on hit decreased, but a ratio was added. Physical damage on hit was also added, and stack bonuses now scale with stats from other sources. So what all of this means is that champions like Kog'Maw and Varus will no longer be rushing this item because it's no longer a viable first buy. The base damages were significantly reduced, so it's no longer good as a rush item, it is better in the late game. It will fit into some other builds, it's not a dead item right now, but it won't be rushed on things like Varus and Kog'Maw anymore. Another item that did receive some tweaks was the Dead Man's Plate. They made it so the slow is now magic damage instead of physical damage, and the momentum generation was also tweaked. From what I read, this will now be a better item on fighters that are actually auto-attacking. It's not as strong on the CC bots like Maokai's and Nautilus's, now you'll see it more on things like Aurelia and other fighters that do actually stick onto their targets. It was an item you were seeing less and less, so now at least it does sound like you will see this item a lot more than you did before. The last item that was reworked a little bit would be the Abyssal Mask. They changed it so the aura radius was a little bit smaller than before, but the magic damage amplifier went from 10% to 15%. Therefore, you won't be getting the increased damage at a really long range, but you will be getting even more damage at a close range. This means, of course, champions like Xerath will definitely not be picking up an Abyssal Mask because they won't get that increased damage, but something like a Mumu that is getting in close ranges will make really great use of the item. Now, there was also some straight up nerfs to items as well, and the first one was the static Shiv. Now, honestly, even though I do play a bunch of AD carry, you can't blame them for this one because basically every single AD carry out there has to pick up a static Shiv. They made it so the proc damage went from 60 to 160 down to 60 to 140, so it's not the end of the world, but the bad part is the wave clear dropped tremendously. It used to deal bonus damage to minions, and that is now completely gone. So what this means is that AD carries won't be able to stall games as good, and their farming will also drop off just a little bit. Now because of this, champions that do have really good stall like Anivia may even raise up in priority because you won't have the static Shivs as often to help stall games. It will still be a pretty decent item however, but it's not going to be a 100% pickup. The other item that was just straight up nerfed was the Seraphs Embrace. This is another item nerf that when I look at it objectively, I completely agree with. The shield ratio went from 20% of your current mana down to 15% of your current mana, and the shield duration also dropped from 3 to 2 seconds. I'm sure you all would have to admit that champions that do get this item really early, like a Cassiopeia, Ryze, and even a Victor, are really strong with this item and are very tanky while outputting a ton of damage. It honestly was a bit too much. It's still going to be a very strong item, but thank God that they did change this as well. Now in this patch there was also two item buffs, and the first one was the Hextech GL P800. Not too much changed about this item, all that changed was its total cost down from 3,000 to 2,800 and the combined cost from 850 to 650. This is definitely not the best item in my opinion. Some champions do pick it up and it is pretty decent on those champions, but in general, not the best. With that 200 lower cost, I don't think I'll see it a ton more, but at least some people will pick it up because it is just a bit cheaper. I think a tiny bit more should be done to this item to make it more viable, but at least they did something. The other item that they decided to buff was the Rapid Fire Cannon. Now I get that they kinda wanted to make the proc damage match the static Shiv, but this item was already pretty much a must buy on most champions, so I don't really understand too much why they buffed it. As somebody that plays a fair amount of AD carry however, I'm not gonna really complain. I feel like in this patch you're gonna see less static Shivs now and a lot more rapid fire cannons. These are definitely the two most common crit attack speed items on AD carries, so I'm not really too sure why you would nerf the one and then buff the other. Now there was actually a new item created as well, which is the Shurelyas Reverie. Now this isn't actually a new item, it was in the game before and they did remove it, but to some of you this is a brand new item. This item was put back into the game because they did take the Talisman of Ascension out of the game, and of course there was no speed boost item anymore for supports. So now if you are one of those support champions that are looking to engage with the rest of your team, this will be a great item for you. For one example, this will pretty much be a core item I feel like on Alistar. It'll give champions some really nice stats with 10% cooldown reduction and even some nice movement speed. The active, however, is obviously the best part of the item because 40% movement speed for your team for 3 seconds is really, really strong. There was also a few changes to the support items. The first thing that was removed was Bandit. You'll no longer be granted gold when a nearby enemy minion is killed by one of your allies or when attacking enemy champions. In a way, I feel like this is Riot's way of saying stop sitting in lane all damn game long, go out and roam, influence the map. For the Spell Thief line of items, you will also be locked out if you do kill a minion and you will not get your gold per 10 generation anymore, so you do have to be careful. The Ancient Coin now grants you 5 movement speed, and the Nomad's Medallion and Time-Worn Talisman of Ascension gives you 10 movement speed. The gold coin reward was also changed from 40 gold to 45 gold. Then finally, the Relic Shield, Targon's Brace, and Time-Worn Face of the Mountain all had their health reduced. The gold, however, did drop from 2200 to 2100, and you do get more passive gold generation now. It used to be 2 gold per 10 seconds, but now to make up for the fact that you don't get any when you hit the enemy, you get 4 gold per 10 seconds. None of these changes were crazy, that's for sure, but I feel like this kind of pushes all the items into a similar sort of power strength. Of course, by that, I mean you don't have to feel like you have to go for one certain item, all of them are fairly viable. So that now finally covers all the item changes. Let's quickly look at the summoner changes. Now these are fairly simple to understand, but the first was the buff to Ignite. They made it so the damage went from 70 to 410 all the way up to 80 to 505. This was definitely needed because Ignite was becoming less and less popular. Mid laners were starting to take Teleport and Heal pretty much all the time. Now Ignite's going to be a lot more popular and it's going to be great, especially in the mid lane. The other summoner spell change was made to Heal, which was a nerf. What they did here was take the cooldown from 240 seconds and put it up to 270 seconds. Since they did also buff Ignite, you're going to see a lot less mid laners go for Heal and take Ignite instead, but now AD carries are kind of affected by this. Because of all the buffs to assassins, there's already going to be more than enough as there is, but now AD carries are also not going to have their Heal whenever they need it. It's not the end of the world, you'll still need Heal in the bot lane, but it is a minor nerf. Now let's move on to the champion changes, and these ones I'm going to try to move through rather quickly because there is a lot of them. So the first one here is Kazakhs. He didn't really get buffed or nerfed, he kind of just got adjusted a bit. They did remove the extra damage to minions on his W, however, so his jungle clear is going to be a little bit worse, but he will of course be able to rush a Tiamat, and that may be more common. Now they did however do a lot of changes to his Q. They did lower the base damage on the ability, but they gave him a little bit more of a bonus attack damage ratio. They also made the isolated bonus damage go from 65 to 100, so if it is an isolated target, it will do a crazy amount of damage. They also made the isolated damage base damage go up a tiny bit as well, and made the bonus go from 1.98 to 2.6 for a ratio. That means Kazakhs is going to be a little bit weaker against targets that are kind of clumped up, but in 1v1s he's going to be absolutely insane. The other champion that received some significant changes was Caixa, and these were really needed. They first made it so her base attack range went from 500 to 525, so she's going to be a little bit stronger in that lane phase. They also increased the passive and Q ability power ratios, her Q range increased, her W ability power ratio decreased, but her E cast time decreased, her E movement speed increased, and her R radius increased as well. She was definitely one of the weaker junglers / AD carries when she was released, but now with these changes, hopefully she makes at least somewhat of a push and she's not on the dead bottom. I don't know an absolute ton about Caixa, I haven't even made a guide on her yet, but these do look pretty promising. Another champion that received some buffs in this patch was Lucian. He's a champion that's been struggling for a little bit, mainly because of losing the Tracker's Knife Wardhop. They did, however, make it so his passive returned more energy and gave his Q 100 more range. Finally, they increased the base damage on his ultimate from 150 to 450 all the way up to 150 to 600. That means he's not going to fall off as hard as he did before, and hopefully he can find some spot in the meta. Lucian also received a little bit of love this patch. The press the attack buff did help Lucian a little bit, but he's still not in the right spot. They increased the base damage on his W ability and also gave him a really nice ratio on his ultimate. The ratio per shot went from 0.20 to 0.25, and his max ratio went from 4.0 to 6.0 all the way up to 5.0 to 7.5. He will be doing a lot of damage, especially if he can land a full culling, and hopefully he can find a place in the meta as well. Another champion that received some really nice changes was Quinn. She's a champion that's definitely not popular right now, but after these changes you'll probably see her a little bit more often. They did reduce her base attack damage by 3, but did give her more of an attack damage growth, which changed from 2.4 to 3. They also made it so Sky Strike applies vulnerable to all enemies hit, and taking damage while channeling it no longer cancels your ultimate. When you are running around and behind enemy lines, if you take damage it no longer will end it immediately, you will instead be slowed for 3 seconds. That means you won't be completely screwed whenever you take damage, you won't be completely dismounted. As long as you can get away, you will get that movement speed again and easily escape. Then there is the one support champion that received buffs, Rakan. Riot felt like he was really good with Xayah, but when it came to other AD carries, it was not that great. They changed the AP ratio on his Q ability from 0.5 to 0.6, and the AP ratio on his W from 0.5 to 0.7. To normal champions, he will also gain 100 extra range from his E ability, so he will be able to shield them from farther away. Hopefully now you won't only see Rakan with Xayah. Graves also received some love this patch, and he got some nice base stats increases. His attack damage growth went from 2.41 to 3, and his magic resist growth went from 0.5 to 1. His W's wind-up time also dropped from 0.25 to 0.15, and the vision reduction now applies more quickly. These are some pretty nice changes, and you should now see Graves a bit more often. I don't even remember the last time I saw one. Kain is another champion you don't see too often these days, and he got some love as well. The ratio on his blade's reach went from 1.2 to 1.3, and he got more damage on his Umbral Trespass as well. Now this does only work on his normal form and his Shadow Assassin, but the ratio did go from 1.5 to 1.75. That means Shadow Assassin is going to be more of an assassin because Dusk Blade was nerfed after all and they needed some damage somewhere, but Rost is still going to be the same. Misfortune also did get a very minor buff. It was an attack damage growth of 1 extra, which means you get 1 more AD every time you level, which will make a minor impact, but it's definitely not going to break the game. She is a champion that is falling out of the meta, and since she did just get a brand new skin, they had to do something, so at least they did give her 1 extra AD every time she levels up. Now here is the change I was waiting for the most, Nocturne. A lot of you definitely know that I play a lot of Nocturne, and they did increase the base damage of his ultimate from 150 to 350 to 150 to 400. The ratio also went from 1.2 to 1.5 bonus attack damage, so he will be hitting like crazy. They did of course nerf the damage on the Dusk Blade, which is something he rushes, so he will not be doing a crazy amount more damage, but it will be pretty nice in the later stages of the game, and he'll still be able to delete people. Another champion that got some much needed buffs was Rengar. They made it so his empowered savagery went from 1.3 to 1.4, and he got some extra damage on his Bola Strike as well. Both the normal and empowered ratio went from 0.7 to 0.8. There was also a lot of bug issues that were fixed as well, so that is fantastic, and hopefully Rengar isn't a completely garbage champion now. Shaco also got the damage back on his Q ability. Shaco's next basic attack after Deceive now deals between 10 and 50 plus 0.7 bonus AD and 0.3 AP bonus physical damage. This was definitely needed back because Shaco fell way out of meta, and since they did reduce the damage on the Dusk Blade, he would have been even worse, so this is definitely a welcomed change. As much as Shaco does piss me off, he did need this buff. Even everybody's favorite champion Talon got buffed. They made it so his passive's damage keeps scaling and doesn't stop at 11. He will continue to scale as the game progresses. Then finally, they changed the ratio on his ultimate from 0.8 to 1. Yes guys, fear not, Talon will still be able to one-shot you even after the reduced damage on the Dusk Blade. It's okay, you can still look forward to that. Wukong actually got some pretty nice buffs as well. They made his attack damage growth go from 3.2 to 4 and also increased the damage on his Q. It used to just do flat 1.1 total AD, but now it scales from 1.1 to 1.5. That means Wukong will be able to do some really nice damage as he scales his Q ability and be able to one-shot people if he does go for a lethality build. And finally, the last buffed assassin, Zed. For him, they made it so the pass-through damage changed from 60% to 50%, but the multi-hit penalty was removed. That means multiple champions hit will be hit for less, but single targets will take even more damage if hit by more than one shuriken. They then changed the stored damage on his death mark from 25 to 45 all the way up to 25 to 55. That is a pretty significant ratio increase, and if his targets do have a lot of attack damage and he steals that, he's going to be hitting like crazy and he will be able to delete people throughout the entire game. Now before everybody freaks out about all these buffed assassins, you do have to keep in mind that Dusk Blade's damage was nerfed. For a lot of these champions, a lot of these buffs are kind of just making up for that reduced Dusk Blade damage. But with all those champion changes covered, let's look at the new Keystone. This is a Keystone meant for champions who excel in long drawn out fights, especially the melee ones. So for example, Darius comes right to mind. This makes it so after 4 seconds in combat, your first attack against an enemy champion grants you between 10 and 35 attack damage based on level for 3 seconds and converts 20% of that damage to true damage. That is a pretty crazy Keystone, and you will start seeing it on those champions that fight for long durations. Now there is a melee only component which makes damaging enemy champions refresh the buff. That makes it even stronger than it already was, and you will definitely start seeing this, especially in the top lane. They did also make a new normal rune which is located in the resolve tree called Chrysalis. This one is meant for things like AD carries that want a bit of tankiness in the early stages of the game and then want attack damage instead later. When you start the game, you'll have an additional 60 health. When you do get 4 takedowns, you consume that health to gain an adaptive bonus of 9 attack damage or 15 ability power. So this of course would make it great for AD carries, but it may also be pretty strong for people looking to snowball. They'll want a little bit of extra tankiness in the early stage of the game and then get attack damage to keep snowballing later on. It is a pretty decent rune, and you will definitely see it from time to time. The rune bone plating did also get nerfed. The duration went from 5 seconds to 3 seconds. When it was made, it was kind of meant as an anti-burst rune, but the duration is so long that it's just generally a really solid pick, so they did reduce the duration so it's not going to be as strong as it was before. It's still definitely going to be a pretty decent rune, and you'll still see it. Now they did also remove Iron Skin and Mirror Shell, but honestly nobody took those anyways, so who really cares? But for those people that wanted to know, they are no longer in the game. Now in this patch, Riot even introduced voice chat. Now I was testing this out with a certain somebody for purposes of this video, and I must say we both really did like it. The quality was a lot better than I thought it would be, and there's a lot of built-in functionality that actually works perfectly. The one downside we did have with it was when the game did end, we could no longer hear each other. We had to, I guess, go in the lobby right again, but other than that, it's pretty flawless. As long as you keep hitting play again, I assume there would be no problem with it whatsoever. In this patch, they also introduced 4 new skins, and of course the first one is the one I'm using in this gameplay, Gun Goddess Misfortune. Now this is actually a pretty solid skin because you can change your form throughout the game, as I'm sure a lot of you have seen throughout that gameplay. I am somebody who definitely enjoys playing Misfortune, and I do not regret at all buying this skin. Another skin that will be coming out this patch is Bertio Galio. This is a pretty ridiculous skin. In fact, it is more of a troll skin, and the trolls that do play Galio will definitely be picking this one up. A chicken Galio running around with a bucket of chicken, that's got troll written all over it. I guess it is designed pretty good for what it is, but I will not be buying this one. Then you've got the typical skin for the thirsty boys, Pizza Delivery Sivir. Another fairly troll skin, but I must admit a lot better than Bertio. I don't know what it is, just throwing out a pizza as a boomerang is just kind of annoying to me for some reason. It is kind of an okay looking skin and there is a nice chroma for it, but also not for me. And finally, for our last skin, we got Hextech Alistair. Now this is a pretty nice skin because I'm not a huge fan of all the other Alistair ones, and this one's actually pretty decent looking. I don't play a lot of support myself, but I can definitely get down with this skin. And finally, there were a bunch of chromas also released, and also some emotes. Most of the chromas are pretty decent. I'm definitely a bigger fan of the Renekton ones, but the Galio one is pretty troll, especially that pink one, and honestly the Pugma is not that great looking at all. I do definitely like the normal Pugma. All the other ones are just kind of crappy variants of it, honestly. I'm not a huge fan, but some of you may find a dog in there that you actually like. Then as for the emotes, the Raise Your Dongers one is actually pretty solid, and the Poppy one is pretty terrifying. That face I do not like, and I don't appreciate Riot making that a thing. But that, ladies and gentlemen, covers everything I've got for patch 8.6. Now this video was a lot longer than usual. Thank you guys for sticking through it with me. Now if you guys do like these videos, because I do want to start making these a lot more often, make sure you guys thumb it up and let me know down in the comments. Also, make sure you check out the video description for a link to all my social medias, and I do also have a Discord server down there as well. But other than that, thank you guys a lot for watching the video. I really do appreciate it, so take it easy, have a good day, and peace.